if you want to see a 60-year-old real estate mogul from the Upper East. Side choke on a $4,000 Beluga caviar tartlet, just put a notice of foreclosure on his table, right in the middle of his son's wedding rehearsal dinner. Exactly 48 hours ago, my perfect fiancé Tyler and my so-called best friend Olivia were absolutely certain they had trampled me. They rejoiced at my fabricated bankruptcy, rubbed their hands at the thought of my fictitious $2.4 million IRS debt, and celebrated their betrayal in the bed of a Park Avenue penthouse. They laughed at my cheap provincial pedigree while sipping 2008 vintage Dom Pérignon. They considered themselves predators at the top of New York's food chain. They just didn't account for one little detail. My downfall was an illusion, a cruel, carefully orchestrated test of humanity, which these snobs failed miserably. And while they thought I was crying in a cheap motel, my lawyer was finalizing the deal of my life. I am not just some simple-minded, working-class girl from Ohio, which the Vanderwood family wanted me to be. I am the anonymous owner and majority partner of the closed hedge fund Aegis Capital Trust, the fund that, at exactly 9 a.m. that same day, aggressively bought out all the delinquent commercial loans and mortgages of their great family empire, totaling $145 million. I stood in the middle of their snow-white tent in East Hampton to the sound of the Atlantic Ocean, wearing a perfect silk Oscar de la Renta dress. I looked into their pale faces, distorted with horror, and felt nothing but absolute icy calm. I didn't come to throw a tantrum or ask for explanations. I came to take everything from them, their business, their historic mansion, their social status, and the best part, I was going to do it completely legally. But let's go back 8 months, to the moment when I first let this pack of piranhas believe they had me on a leash. To Tyler Vanderwood and his pompous family, I was always just that sweet girl from Akron, Ohio. A convenient background for his flawlessness. Tyler was the epitome of the Manhattan dream. A perfect jawline, $3,000 cashmere Loro, piano sweaters, an Ivy League legacy, and a platinum American Express Centurion card that he flashed in Tribeca's most expensive restaurants. His family owned Vanderwood Properties, a company with a portfolio of commercial real estate all over New York. They smelled of Tom Ford perfumes, century-old trust funds, and toxic arrogance. Tyler's mother, Eleanor, loved to humiliate me with that refined politeness that only Upper East Side women are capable of. At our engagement party at the Plaza Hotel, she loudly wondered if my parents had rented their suits at the local Macy's Mall. She constantly reminded me that their blood was old money, and my absolute peak was to marry well and not ruin their family. Photos on the covers of Town and Country magazine. And me? I just played my part, I told Tyler I had a modest consulting firm. I said that I made about $150,000 a year. Enough to buy my own Lululemon leggings and pay half our rent in Soho, but not enough to traumatize his fragile male ego. I never told him that my modest consulting was developing algorithmic trading strategies. And I definitely didn't mention that my personal net worth had long ago exceeded the GDP of a small island nation. I liked being invisible. It gave me freedom. From the outside, everything looked perfect. A fairy tale proposal in Aspen, a 3-carat Tiffany diamond ring, plans for a lavish wedding, and Olivia was always there, my best friend, since our time studying at Columbia University. Olivia was a typical daughter of rich parents. She graduated from law school only to find a high-status husband, worked as a junior partner in a mid-sized firm, and always hovered around us. She looked at Tyler with adoration, and with me she played solidarity, sympathizing when Eleanor once again dropped toxic comments about my working-class roots. Olivia was my safe island, or so I thought. The illusion was absolute. Until one evening at Lee Bernardin restaurant, Tyler's elite black card was declined due to exceeding the limit. He laughed it off, calling it a bank error, and paid with another one. But my analytical brain caught on to this detail. I started noticing the little things, how nervously Tyler answered calls, how often Olivia stayed with him to discuss the legal details of our prenup while I flew out on business trips. The perfect facade of the Vanderwoods cracked, and I decided to look inside. My analytical brain does not know how to ignore anomalies. A declined Centurion card is not a technical glitch. It's a symptom of financial bleeding. The next day, when Tyler went to play golf at the exclusive Baltusrol Club in New Jersey, I opened his forgotten iPad Pro at home. He was so overconfident that he hadn't even changed the PIN code, his mother's birth date. I synced his iCloud with my encrypted server and started digging. It took me exactly 40 minutes to find a hidden folder on his Google Drive shared with only one address, the private email of my best friend, Olivia. I didn't cry. I poured myself a double espresso into a Baccarat crystal glass, sat at the Italian marble kitchen island, and started reading. The first document was a draft of our prenuptial agreement, prenup. It wasn't just asset protection. It was a masterpiece of legal sadism, written personally by Olivia. Hidden inside was a clause about joint and several liability for any loans taken out during the marriage for the development of the family business. I delved into the financial reports Tyler had forwarded to Olivia, the famous Vanderwood properties empire was a colossus with feet of clay. Since the pandemic, their commercial real estate in Midtown had stood half empty. They were burning cash. Their flagship skyscraper on Lexington Avenue carried a giant loan, a so-called balloon payment of $145 million, which had to be paid off by the end of the year. And then I understood their brilliant plan. Tyler didn't need a wife. He needed a perfect FICO score, a stable income, and the clean financial history of a naive girl from Ohio, so I could act as a co-signer for the refinancing of this debt. They planned to take the loan, siphon the money through shell companies in Delaware, and then divorce me. According to Olivia's contract, I would be left with tens of millions in debt to federal banks, while Tyler would walk away clean. But the worst part was in another folder, with iMessage screenshots and photos. Tyler and Olivia in a $2,000 a night room at the St. Regis Hotel on a yacht in Miami when I thought he was at a conference. Olivia was wearing a diamond Cartier love bracelet that Tyler supposedly bought for his mother's anniversary. In their correspondence, they called me a provincial idiot and a useful subsidy. 6 more months, baby, Tyler wrote to Olivia last Friday. Well, get her to sign the papers on the Tribeca house as collateral. I'll bankrupt her, and we'll move to Monaco. Can't wait to see her face when she gets sued by the debt collectors, replied my best friend. I sat in the perfect silence of our Soho apartment. There was no pain in my chest, only cold. An absolute icy vacuum in which the cruelest version of myself was being born. They wanted to play financial games with someone who made a living by algorithmically destroying competitors on Wall Street. Well then, challenge accepted. When Tyler returned from his golf in Baltusrol, I met him with a perfect smile and a glass of his favorite $200 Chateauneuf du Pape. I listened to his boring lies about traffic jams on the George Washington Bridge, gently adjusting the collar of his Ralph Lauren polo, and felt only a slight disgust, as if touching an expensive but dead reptile. The next morning began the second act of my play. Olivia and I met for brunch at Balthaser on Spring Street. She ate her eggs Benedict and excitedly chirped about the orchids for the wedding centerpieces, carefully hiding that same diamond Cartier bracelet under the sleeve of her cashmere cardigan. I looked at her, the person who for 6 years had called me sister, and learned to breathe poison without poisoning myself. Olive, I'm so worried, I theatrically sighed, pushing away my mimosa glass and putting on the most defenseless look possible. My accountant called yesterday. It seems the IRS is initiating a deep audit of my consulting firm. They suspect some inconsistencies in my 1099 forms. Over the last 3 years, they say my Chase accounts will have to be temporarily frozen while the investigation is ongoing. It might even lead to asset forfeiture if they find. Penalties, a primal terror flashed in our pupils for a millisecond. If my accounts were seized, my FICO credit score would drop below 600 and I would become absolutely useless for their $145 million debt refinancing scam. Oh, honey, how awful, Olivia instantly pulled on her mask of sympathy, covering my hand with hers. But don't you worry. Tyler will never leave you. You're family after all. I almost laughed in her face. I knew for a fact that the moment we parted ways, she would run to the bathroom to text Tyler on iMessage that the useful subsidy had become a toxic asset. That same evening, Tyler was unusually nervous. He poured himself a double Macallan scotch, avoided eye contact, and seemingly, by accident, slid the very folder with the updated prenup drafted by Olivia onto my desk. Baby, my lawyers slightly changed the wording here. It's a standard joint and several liability clause. Just sign it so we can close this issue before the rehearsal dinner. I have. To protect our future joint business, you know, he purred, smelling of Santo 33 perfume and desperation. I blinked my eyes like a naive fawn in the headlights, gently stroked his cheek, and hid the contract in my bag. Of course, darling. I'll look it over tomorrow. I trust you. Completely. They were confident they were playing a blind provincial girl. They had no idea that I'd just locked them in a cage and started pouring gasoline into it. While Tyler and Olivia prepared their escape routes, I deployed the heavy artillery. The next morning, instead of the gym, I rented a private office in a Fifth Avenue skyscraper where my real lawyers worked, an elite team from the firm Cravath, Swain & Moore, which handled mergers and acquisitions for the Fortune 500. I tossed my iPad with Tyler's stolen archive onto the oak table and sat in a leather chair that remembered more than $1 billion arbitration. Gentlemen, we have a change of plans, I told the 3 men in Brioni suits who usually only saw me on teleconferences from Switzerland. My modest wedding is canceled. Instead, we are buying Vanderwood properties. My senior partner, 60-year-old Arthur, raised a gray eyebrow. They're not for sale. They're flagship. Asset in Midtown is mortgaged under a balloon payment for $145 million, and the term expires in 3 months. They are desperately looking for refinancing, but nobody on Wall Street will give it to them at such a junk valuation. Exactly. And I'm going to buy out this debt anonymously. Today, I handed them the folder with Tyler's financial insider information. I have all their creative tax returns. They use shell LLC companies in Wyoming to hide income and inflate asset values. That is wire fraud. Arthur quickly skimmed through the documents, and his eyes lit up with that predatory gleam that appears in the best New York lawyers when they smell blood. If you buy out their debt through your offshore trust, Aegis, you will become their primary creditor. Given these covenant breaches, you can declare a technical default on the loan at any moment. We can initiate foreclosure 24 hours before the deadline or on the day of the rehearsal dinner. I finished in an icy tone. I want the foreclosure documents ready exactly by 7 p.m. on Friday. The next 72 hours were like a strategic special operation. I used a multi-layered corporate structure through the Cayman Islands so that no one in the financial world could trace the beneficiary of Aegis Capital Trust. My fund quietly bought out all the debt obligations of Vanderwood properties at a significant discount from J.P. Morgan Chase. The bankers were happy to get rid of this toxic asset. In parallel, I was fueling Tyler's panic. I hired an actor who accidentally met us in the lobby of our building, introduced himself as an IRS agent, and loudly asked about my frozen accounts in the presence of our neighbors. Tyler turned as white as a ghost. That same evening, I noticed him hiding new passports in the safe and withdrawing cash from a Bank of America ATM. And the day before the wedding, I sent Olivia a tearful audio message on WhatsApp. Olive, it's over. My lawyer says that because of the audit, I have to declare Chapter 7 bankruptcy. I have nothing left. Tyler is going to be shocked. I'm afraid to tell him. Before the wedding, 15 minutes later, I received an SMS from Tyler. We need to talk. Seriously, I can't right now. I'll stay overnight in a hotel. I need to think. We'll discuss. Everything tomorrow before dinner. The trap was set. They had taken off the safety themselves and put the gun to their own temples. And I was just keeping my finger on the trigger. Friday, day X. The morning began predictably with a cowardly SMS from Tyler at 8:15. Sorry, I can't tie my life to a bankrupt. It will destroy my family's reputation. My lawyers will contact you regarding the termination of our lease. The wedding is canceled. I smiled, finishing my morning matcha. He didn't even have the courage to call. The geolocation of his Porsche 911 Carrera, which I tracked through the linked family account, already showed that he had parked near Olivia's Greenwich Village townhouse. They decided not to cancel the rehearsal dinner in East Hampton. Eleanor simply turned it into a private banquet for the elite in honor of her son's miraculous rescue from a mercantile provincial girl with IRS debts. Olivia, of course, was there in the status of the new, unofficial lady of the house. At 6:50 p.m., my rented black Maybach S-Class softly braked in the driveway of the $30 million Vanderwood estate. Security tried to stop me, but I just walked right through them. I was wearing that same silk Oscar de la Renta dress, Harry Winston diamond studs, and not a drop of makeup that would betray tears or despair. Just perfect, deadly posture. I walked out onto the back terrace. A string quartet was playing Vivaldi. Waiters in white gloves were carrying around Kumamoto oysters. Tyler stood by the infinity pool, possessively hugging Olivia's waist, while Eleanor raised a glass of vintage champagne. To the fact that we dumped this toxic ballast right on time, his mother laughed, ringingly, her platinum necklace sparkling. And to honest people who stay close, Olivia added sweetly, pressing herself against my ex-fiancé. I slowly approached their table, covered with an Egyptian cotton tablecloth. The string quartet stumbled mid-note. An absolute dead silence hung in the air, broken only by the sound of the Atlantic waves. What are you doing here? Eleanor hissed, her face instantly breaking out in red blotches. Security! Get this beggar out. She's going to ruin the carpets. Tyler turned pale but tried to put on his alpha male mask. You better leave. My lawyer sent you a cease and desist order. There's nothing for you here. I didn't say a word. I unzipped my Hermes Birkin bag and pulled out a heavy stack of documents sealed by the New York State Supreme Court. My lawyer Arthur silently materialized behind my back, like an angel of death in a perfect Brioni suit. I threw the 50-page folder right into the center of the table, almost knocking over the black caviar tartlets. This isn't from your lawyers, Tyler. It's from mine. My voice was flat, like the line of a heart monitor in a morgue. This is a notice of acceleration and foreclosure, an official notice of default and immediate seizure of property. I leaned both hands on the table, looking straight into the terrified eyes of the moguls. Your $145 million debt for the skyscraper on Lexington Avenue, plus a cross-default clause, which automatically brings down this very Hampton estate. I am the majority partner of Aegis Capital Trust. I bought out your loans from J.P. Morgan, and since you breached the financial covenants with your shady LLC in Wyoming, you are officially bankrupt, and I am taking the keys. The ringing of shattered crystal cut through the silence. A baccarat glass slipped from Eleanor's trembling fingers and scattered into hundreds of sparks across the terracotta tiles. Tyler tried to laugh. It was a pathetic, choked sound, like the bark of a dog. whose paw had been stepped on. This is some sick joke. You are nobody. You have your accounts frozen by the IRAs. Security, call the police. This lunatic forged the state court seals. I didn't even blink. I slowly took out my iPhone 15 Pro, opened the Bloomberg Terminal app, and turned the screen toward his face. There was no IRA's audit, Tyler. It was a stress test. A bait that you and Olivia swallowed so greedily that you didn't even check the Delaware public records. I was never a poor consultant. My algorithms manage billion-dollar portfolios. And your family trust? It just ceased to exist. At that moment, Tyler's phone vibrated. The screen showed the number of his chief financial officer, CFO, with trembling hands. He answered the call and turned on the speakerphone. An hysterical voice came from the speaker. Tyler, the Wells Fargo accounts are frozen. Aegis Capital just initiated foreclosure proceedings under Article 9 of the Uniform Commercial Code, UCC. They are taking everything. The skyscraper on Lexington, the warehouses in Queens, even your 401k retirement account, which you illegally tied to the collateral. They know about the Wyoming offshore. The SEC has already sent subpoenas. We're all done. 4. Tyler swayed, grabbing the edge of the table, as if gravity had suddenly crashed down upon him. His perfect St. Tropez tan faded to the color of raw dough. He looked at me as if the devil in his silk dress was standing before him. Olivia, my dear friend, with her law degree, with honors, was doing the math in her head at record speed. She realized two things with horror. First, the diamond Cartier bracelet on her wrist was bought with credit money from a company that just became the property of the woman she hates. Second, Tyler Vander Wood is now not just unemployed. His personal net worth is currently minus $145 million. She recoiled from Tyler sharply, as if struck by electricity. I knew nothing about Wyoming. Her voice broke into an ultrasound squeak. She backed away, barely, tripping over her own Jimmy Choo heels. Tyler, you lied to me. You said the money was legal. Shut up, Olivia. Tyler screamed, losing the remnants of his Ivy League polish. He fell to his knees right onto the expensive carpet, ignoring the dozens of smartphone cameras that the elite guests had already taken out. Please, you can't do this. This is my family's legacy. We can make a deal. I'll sign a restructuring. I'll do anything. Eleanor gasped for air, like a fish washed ashore, convulsively clutching her pearls. This is my home, she croaked. My home. You will not take my home. Arthur, my lawyer, coughed dryly, adjusting his tie. Technically, Mrs. Vanderwood, this is no longer your home. According to the cross-default clause, the ownership rights to this property transferred to my client at 5 p.m. You have exactly 2 hours to gather your personal belongings. After that, the Pinkerton security firm will change all the locks. The panic became tangible to the touch. It was the smell of sweat, expensive vintage champagne, and absolute devastating ruin. I looked down at Tyler. His perfectly styled hair was disheveled, and his cashmere Laura Piana sweater suddenly seemed like a cheap, stretched-out rag. The man who just yesterday planned to destroy my life and pin a multi-million-dollar federal debt on me was now crawling on my terracotta tiles, begging for alms. I shifted my gaze to Olivia. She was already feverishly digging through her iPhone, having backed away to a swan-shaped ice sculpture, probably deleting joint photos with Tyler from her Instagram. By the way, Olive, my voice rang out over the pool, icy and clear, making her freeze. Since you were the co-author of that brilliant prenuptial agreement and a direct accomplice in the money laundering scheme through shell companies in Wyoming, my lawyers have already sent copies of your correspondence to the New York State Bar Association. Enjoy your disbarment. And, you'll have to declare that Cartier bracelet as income when the IRS Agents come for you. Eleanor was sobbing on the shoulder of one of the bewildered waiters. Her pompous old money evaporated faster than the bubbles in her vintage Dom Pérignon. I slowly turned around, feeling the cool breeze from the Atlantic Ocean playing with the silk of my dress. It was the scent of pure, absolute freedom. I didn't need this pretentious mansion. I was going to tear it the hell down next month and build an elite rehabilitation center on this land for women who had suffered from financial abuse. Tyler made one last, desperate lunge and tried to grab the hem of my dress. "You can't just walk away," he croaked, smearing tears across his cheeks. "Who do you even think you are?" I stopped for a moment. I turned my head and looked into his empty, pathetic eyes. The same perfect, deadly smile that I'd been practicing for the last few months played on my lips. "Me?" I said quietly, but loud enough for all the elite guests to hear. "I'm just that. Same useful subsidy from Akron, Ohio. Pack your things, Vanderwoods. Your lease time is up." I got into the back seat of my black Maybach, nodded to the driver, and the heavy armored doors cut me off from their pathetic whining with a dull thud. The game was over. I broke the bank.